Hello, in today's video we're going to add this little player HUD addition like we've got here that shows the abilities that the player can get in the game, allows us to toggle through them, and will even allow us to call a different function based on which ability we have selected. Right now that's just the boomerang, but eventually it will be all of them. Hi, my name is Michael. Welcome to my 2D action and adventure RPG tutorial series. Follow along and learn how to create your own ARPG in Godot 4 using GD script. Hey everybody, so one more video about user interface before we can start adding new abilities. If you recall, what we did in the last video was we added to our inventory screen this section where we show the gear, the ability type items that the user has collected. What we're going to do today is we're going to go into our player HUD and we're going to add a representation of those as well and make it so that the user can toggle between them. And for this tutorial, you will need the same asset that we used in the last one. If you recall, we have these icons that we used here and this texture atlas. Let's see if I can open it up. Let me do this, edit region. It includes in here these 4 miniature pure white versions of the icon that we'll be using in today's video. So if you don't have that, go ahead and drop into the HIO page linked in the description and grab this asset pack. All right, let's go ahead and open up our player HUD. And let's see, where on earth is that? It's going to be under GUI. And here's our player HUD folder that I've got. And I'm just going to open up the scene. There it is. Now, right now, I'm going to hide the notifications. And I'm actually a little bit worried that I will forget to reveal those. So let's see. Oh, no, it should be fine because we set it to visible when we begin. Let me make sure this is the right one though. Panel, no, it's setting the panel container. So maybe what we'll do is turn that off. There we go. This is the same panel container that we're adjusting in the script. So that should be made visible when we start. I guess it's part of the animation player. Let me just double check this. I want to make sure we're not going to set ourselves up for having our notifications disappear. Yeah, there we go. We're changing the visible property of the panel container right here. Okay, so that's a safe one to turn off. All right, just as long as we can see, because right up here in the top left corner, this is where we're going to be placing this UI for our abilities. So I don't want it to, be an issue. It's hard to design UIs on top of each other because you don't get a good sense of what they look like. Okay, so once we've done that, we'll just go ahead and collapse this. I'm going to make a new control in here. So I'm just going to do Control A, make a new control node. And I'm going to give it a name called Abilities. And I want it to be kind of up here, okay? Now this container is going to strictly be designed to hold our 4 ability icons. And you could add other things to this if you want, though you may need to restructure some things a little bit or change some of the code. But as a child of this abilities container, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add a HBox container. Okay, so that we can have our things kind of stacked horizontally. And I want to come in here, I want to come down to the theme overrides, and I'm just going to turn on separation. I want it on 0 to begin with, okay? And then underneath this, we can add some textures. And I'm going to begin by adding just a texture rect. There we go. That we're going to use to house each of these. And it's going to contain kind of the element that shows the highlight when an ability is highlighted. So in here, I'm just going to add a new texture and it'll be a new gradient 2D texture. Okay, and then I can expand this. I want this to be small, 24 by 24 pixels. Those of you who watched the live stream know that I did this a little bit differently in the live stream. We're going to be doing something different here because I went back, revisited how I built this UI and came up with a slightly different solution. And you can see that this is kind of scaling funny. I'm going to shrink that down, okay? It was kind of expanding the height of this texture because the HBox was taller. So this gradient, I want the fill to be, I want the fill to be radial. And we're going to make it from the center. So that's 0.5 on both axes. And then we can just put 0.5 on the Y on this one. That'll give us a nice gradient that goes from the center to the edge. Now for the color stops on this gradient, we're going to make it kind of a glowy effect. And so for this center one, I'm going to go ahead and click, instead of black, I want it to be like the bright spot of the highlight. So I'm going to pick a yellow color, something kind of like this. It's close to white. And then we'll add a middle stop here. And this middle stop I want to be more orange. I'm not sure quite how orange. Maybe a little bit more towards yellow. Okay. Just something like that. And I'm actually going to go in here and let's drop the alpha of this a little bit to roughly 50%. 0.5 would be halfway, but I'm just, again, roughly. And then this last stop, we're going to make it kind of a red color. So it's in an appropriate spot, maybe a little bit more orange. And we'll drag the opacity all the way down. And so we end up with this highlight just like this, okay? Now you can adjust the position of these or the color to get a different effect if you so desire, but this is what we're going to use here. So now I can go ahead and just duplicate this 4 times, and you can see we've got the spots for each of our items. There's going to be an icon in here, and we're only going to show one of the highlight, whichever one is currently selected, okay? But get to this point, and then we'll start adding the icons. Okay, so now we'll just add a new texture item as a child of each of these, and this is going to be where we add the icons that we're going to display. So I'm just going to do Control A, pick a texture rect once again, and this time we're going to add an atlas texture here. And then for this atlas texture, we want to go ahead and go down to our player folder and get the ability icons and plop that in. Now I'm going to edit the region, and for the first item, we're going to want our boomerang. Okay, that's the first ability in our list, so I'm going to give it a rough selection there. And I think I might have got that just about right, actually. But if we look at this, it should be 16 by 16, which it is, and it's 144. So I just happened to click just right, but if not, you can go ahead and manually enter those values, and that's the exact coordinates of that little icon, and it should be 16 by 16. Now, one thing I want to do, this stretch mode, I want to change this to keep centered. And then down here under layout, I don't know why it's so large. I'm going to go down and transform. I'm going to reset this. 16 by 16 is okay, but we could also go 24 by 24, make it the size of the parent. And because we selected the keep centered, it's just going to center our texture. Okay. So with that done, we can go ahead, copy this and paste it as a child of the next one. Now we may need to make this unique. Let me just try what happens if I adjust this. If I go like this, minus 16. Oops, minus 21. It's not what I wanted. Okay, yeah, so let's go ahead. Before we adjust this, we need to just make this unique. There we go. I'll make this texture unique. And let's see, right here, I meant to type a minus 16. There we go. So like that's the bomb. And actually this one should be the grapple hook. So let me get the coordinates for the grapple hook. It is actually going to be at 144. And 16 on the y-axis. Okay, there we go. So our grappling hook will be the second ability in this display. Now I can copy this and paste it here. And do I need to do that again, or is it going to let me? What happens if I put 0? Yeah, I need to do it again. So let's just go here, make it unique. Okay, so next up will be the bow and arrow. And the bow and arrow coordinates are, let's see, 128 on the X, and then, yeah, 16, 16, 16. And one last time, we'll paste again. Go ahead and set this to make unique. And this will be the bomb, which I think I already kind of accidentally did, but that's what it's going to be 128 on the X axis and then 0 on the Y. So there we go. There's our bomb texture. We've got our 4 textures placed in there. Looking good. Okay, one last thing I want to do is I want to add a label for a quantity, the count for both our arrow and our bombs. If you recall, we did that here within our inventory. Okay, we just want to do the same thing on our player HUD so that even when we're playing the game, we can see how many arrows or bombs we have left. So let's just come up here. Let's see, we'll start with the arrows, and I'm going to do a Control A and just add a label. And we'll call this the arrow count label. And for now, we'll just put placeholder text of 99 in there. And let's go ahead and center this. And what I can do is we can adjust a few things, but let's get the layout. There we go. Let's make the layout width 24. So it's the full width of this. I'm going to just drag it down. And I want to change the font. So we're going to go to Theme Overrides, Fonts. And if we let's see, if we do a quick load, let's find this little small font. If you have a small font, you're going to want that for this because it's, you know, always on the screen. I also want to add just that, an outline, so that it looks kind of like our arrows. So we can do this with colors. Let's go to the font outline color, set it to black. And then underneath constants, we can come in here and we can change the shadow, shadow offset. Here we go, outline size, and just increase that to something like 4. Okay, so now we've got a little stroke, and you may want it a little bit less. I don't know. This is kind of a tricky one because you get kind of that soft outline, and unless you build the outline into your font texture, I don't know that there's a much better way to do this, at least not a simple way, but there we go. You could always go to the outline shader, which was a tutorial I built. Maybe I'll link that, and you could apply that shader to the text here. I think that would work just fine. But regardless, we've got that little bit of text. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to copy this and just come over here to my bomb texture. Oops, I don't think I copied it right. And paste it. And there we go. We've got both of these. Obviously, we need to update this name. This should be called bomb count label. And I'm going to make each of these accessible by the unique name. So access as unique name. Now they'll be easy to access in our script, and then we can update them and do with them as we please. Let's go ahead and just run our project though real quick. So I'm going to go over to this level scene, get it going. There we go. We've got our interface up there in the top left. You can see that the simple white on black is easy to read. Now you can change this however you want. This is just an example placeholder. Okay. We do have a couple issues like this where it's hovering over our pause screen. I don't really like that, but we'll deal with that as we go through the rest of the video. Okay, so maybe the first thing we can do with the code behind this UI is make it so we can update these labels that we just added. So I'm going to open up my player HUD script in here. And let's go ahead and just get a reference to our little labels. So, you know, I don't have much in the way of any of our ability bits here. So let's go ahead and just, I'm going to make a new section to keep them kind of separated. Let's go ahead and select our abilities node then and drag this in while holding control to get a reference to that. And I want a reference to this container as well. And I'm just going to call this, instead of HBox container, I'll call it ability items maybe. And then let's get a reference to these two labels. So just hold control and select both of those. Okay, there we go. This should give us access to everything that we need to finish this out. So now I want to create two little functions. We'll go to the bottom of our script and we're going to create them down here. And these are just going to be two functions to update the bomb and the arrow count. Okay. And we'll make one individual for each. So we'll call the first one update arrow count. And we need to pass in the count or whatever the value is. It'll be in the form of an integer. And we can go ahead. What did I type wrong here? Something not very happy. Oh, there's extra space there. Okay, there we go. Now I'm going to go ahead and copy this, paste it down here, and we'll change the second one to update bomb count. And these are going to be very simple, one line. So we'll just get our arrow count label and set the text equal to, and as you recall, we need to convert our integer to a string to assign it. We had this kind of the same problem in our last video with the inventory, and we'll just add the count in there. Okay. Very simple little function. We'll copy that line, paste it here, and change this to bomb count. And we should be good to go with that. Now, obviously, we need to call these functions for them to do anything, and we need to call them when we first kind of start our game. Let's go ahead and look at our abilities script. Do we even have that open anymore? Doesn't look like we do. So if I come over to my player and find this ability node, where is it? Abilities. There we go. Now in our inventory, what we did is every time we showed the inventory, we grabbed the arrow and the bomb count from the player. But this is different because this ability node kind of exists when the player is created. And that it's not like we're going to show or hide it so much as we just need it to be updated. And so I think one way that we could handle this is in the ready function of our abilities, we could just go ahead and set those. So we could say player HUD, and then what did we call those? We have like, we just made them and I don't remember what they're called. Update arrow count. So update arrow count, and then we can just grab the count from our player. So we'll go down here and get the arrow count. And let's see, just do the same for the bomb count. And this will be enough to kind of get us started. So now if we run the game here, we should see an update. There we go, 2 and 10. Okay, and that matches in here. Now I want to deal with a little bug. Let me just run this again and show. We've already seen this, but I don't know if it's a bug, but it's not very nice. Our abilities cover up the little pause text. It's going to be hard to make this behind the inventory and keep the health on top. So, you can have a decision to do this in a different way, but I just want to hide these abilities when I'm in the inventory because this information is redundant, so it's not really necessary. So what I'll do is I will come into my player HUD, and we're going to connect to the signals that we have when we show and hide our inventory. So here in the ready function is where we'll do that. So I'll just come down here to the bottom of this, and I'm going to just grab our pause menu because it's a global auto load script, and we'll just connect to the shown signal, and we'll just make, we'll make a function on show. I guess we can call it pause. Or we could, yeah, whatever, that works. And then I'm going to copy this, and then there is another signal for when it's hidden. And we'll make a function called on hide, pause. And now let's just go ahead and copy these, and we'll make our new functions at the bottom of the script. Okay, there we go. We've got our little functions set up. They're going to be really simple. And all we really need to do, so on show, whenever we show the pause menu, we want to take our abilities control, right? Which we actually grabbed a reference to already. Here it is. We called it abilities. We just want to hide it. So we'll go abilities dot visible equals false. And then of course, when we hide the pause menu, we can do the opposite. Okay. So let's go ahead and just test that out. I'm already on my scene, so I can run this here. And now when we pause the game, then those abilities disappear. Easy peasy. Okay, so now we're going to get into maybe the most fun part of this, and that is we're going to come in here to our player HUD, and we're going to make it so that the player can actually toggle through these abilities, okay? And we're going to also be making some updates to how our player, how the ability script is written, because as I was doing this live stream, we have our abilities, and I'll go ahead and open the script now, and we'll talk about this. I have these abilities defined in this kind of collection. It's an enum, and it actually was kind of a pain to work with, and I didn't see a whole lot of benefit to it. And so we're going to make a change here. And so the first thing to do with your ability script is change this abilities enum. We're going to change it from an enum. We're going to make it just a variable, and it will be an array. Okay. And the array will contain strings, and we'll just set it equal to a list of all of our abilities. Okay. And so we're going to have 4, and we only had 2 in there, right? And the first one is our boomerang. Now the text here is not going to be super important, though it could be with your game, depending on how you code it. Okay. So we're going to have boomerang. We're going to have our grapple hook, which should be in quotes. We're going to have our bow, and we're going to have bombs, which I'm just going to call bomb singular. And there's our array. Now this selected ability is currently just set as an enum. Instead, we're going to set it to a value. So this is an integer, right? We've just got an index. It's going to be 0, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so we'll set that to 0 by default. Now that's the primary change. That's going to affect our code a little bit as well. But you can see down here, we have in our unhandled input, we have if they press ability, and if the selected ability is boomerang, we can just set this to 0 now. Okay, knowing that 0 is our first ability. And actually, I want to change this from if selected ability to match. So a match is kind of like an if statement, except it a little bit different. So we can say match selected ability. And then all we have to do here is list the conditions. So if it's 0, then we're going to call our boomerang ability function. And then we can just go through. So like if it's 1, this is our, what is number 1? Grapple hook. So we could just print this for now. And so now we'll just go and set up the other one. So we've got 2. This is our bow ability, not box, bow. And lastly, 3 will be for our bomb. Okay. And so now when we push this, depending on which one we have selected, we'll do something different. And right now we're just going to print something to the output console so that we can see if it works. And let's just go ahead and maybe run this. Make sure we didn't break anything completely. Now hopefully, yeah, we can still throw our boomerang. And obviously our HUD isn't quite updated right. Everything looks selected. And so maybe we'll handle that next. Okay, so now that we're done with this, we can kind of start working through this a little bit more. Let's go ahead and, as part of this selection thing, we need to kind of initialize our HUD, and we need to only highlight the item that's selected. And how we're going to do this is we're going to just modulate, we're going to just modulate the item that we're selecting. And so we're going to do this in a couple different ways. We want to modulate the icon itself, but also the highlight. And of course, in the past, we've typically in my videos just used one type of modulate, and that's this primary modulate value here. The problem with this is if we modulate this value, it modulates everything. But what we want to do, right, is we want to be able to fade the glow, but maybe keep the icon. And so self-modulate is where we can do this. So with self-modulate, it will only modulate the node that we apply this self-modulate to, and it won't affect any of the children, okay? And so we'll essentially just modulate the alpha on this parent item to 0, and then on the child items, we'll modulate their transparency to like 50% or something like that. So they'll still be visible when they're not selected, but they won't be quite as bright. This will just help with readability. So let's go to our script, I guess. In our abilities script or player HUD script, we're going to have to handle it. Actually, we're going to have to do stuff in both, right? So first we need a way for our abilities to be able to toggle through, but then as that happens in our player HUD, we need to react to that. So let's actually go ahead in here inside of our player HUD script. Let's start with this part. So we've got things like on show and pause and updating our arrow counts. Right before our update arrow and bomb count functions, we'll make a new function. And this function is what we'll use to kind of update the visibility state of these. And we'll call this one update ability UI. Okay, and then we're going to need an argument in here because we need to know which ability is selected. We'll just do that by the index. And so we'll just have an argument called ability index, which will be an int, and we'll pass that in. And then what we'll do is we'll grab all of our abilities and we'll just iterate through them, and we'll highlight the ones that, the one that is selected, and we'll dim the ones that are not. Okay. So we can go in here and we can say, we can grab our ability items, I guess. So we'll say ability items. And this will be an array of nodes. That's what this will, because we're going to use get children, that's what it returns. So we'll say ability items. In fact, I don't want it to be called ability items. I'm just going to have it called underscore items because I just realized we have a thing called ability items, right? We already grabbed a reference to this container, and we're going to get the children of it. Okay, now just in case you missed that, we did import this or get a non-ready variable of this ability items right here. That's our HBox container. Okay. And now I just got to find that function again because this script is actually getting quite large, isn't it? There it was. Update ability UI. Okay, so we're going to have our items. It's just the children of that. And we'll just iterate through them. So we'll say for I in ability items or underscore items. First, what we'll do is we'll dim all of them. So we'll say a.self-modulate, right? We just looked at this. Self underscore modulate equals color. We can just pass in white, 1, 1, 1, and 0 for the alpha. Okay, so that'll fade that out. And then what we want to do also is, I'm going to go ahead and just kind of copy this. And what we can do is we can apply a regular modulate as well. So this one will affect the children. Okay, so self-modulate will affect the node itself. And then modulate will affect the children nodes. So we'll set this one to, well, let's just go with like a 0.8. So 80% opacity is what that'll be. And I'm going to make it kind of a gray color too. So 0.6 maybe. And I'll put that on each value here. Okay, so it'll be kind of gray and a little bit transparent. So that's going to apply to all. And we can go ahead and test this at this point. Actually, what we're going to want to do is just call this in our onReady function, because we need to kind of initialize this UI. So we'll just call that right here. We'll say update, update ability UI, and we'll just pass in 0. We'll assume we're on the first item. Okay, so now let's go ahead and let's just run this and see what it looks like. And you can see they're all gray and faded out. Now we need to make it so that it highlights the one that we are on, which by default would be the boomerang. Okay, so we'll go back down to our function here. And underneath the if statement, we're going to add some modulate scripts. In fact, we can kind of copy these. Except what we want is we want to set these to, we'll just set it to ones across the board. So 1, 1, 1, and 1. So that's white and full transparency. But we don't have this A. What we need to do instead is we need to grab our ability items at the index that we passed in. So we passed in this ability index. So we'll just use that value here. And sorry, not the ability items, but our collection of items. There we go. We're going to grab the item at the index that we've passed in and update its modulation. So now if we save this and run one more time, we should see the boomerang highlighted. There we go. Okay. Now we currently don't have a way to change which one is highlighted, but what we're going to be doing obviously is calling this update ability UI and passing in a different number, and that'll change which one's highlighted. Now the last thing I want to do with this is I'm going to add a little play audio, because we have a play audio function already built in here, and we just need an audio stream. And in fact, I'm just going to use one that we already have, button focus audio. Okay, so we've already set up a play audio function, and we already have a button focus audio in here. Where is it? Where are export variables? Our audio up here. And then here's the play audio function. So what this will do, and you're only going to hear it briefly, but every time we change which item is selected, you'll get a little sound effect. So hopefully you heard that little pop, but every time we change, you'll hear that. All right. You could plug in, you could add a new export variable if you wanted to for the ability change, and add your own audio file there and just play that. All right, let's go to the next step then. So I'm going to go back to my abilities script. And in here we have this unhandled input, and we're just checking if the ability button is pressed. We need to add a new input action for toggling the abilities. And you can do this multiple different ways. I'm going to do it where we just cycle through them in order. You could add, a forward and a backward ability toggle. You could add direct ability toggles, maybe with the number keys, and so on. But we're just going to do the one simple solution. So here, after this if statement for if our ability action is pressed, we're going to put an elif, and we're just going to say if event.is action pressed. And actually, we need a new action in here. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my project settings, and in the input map, we're going to add a new action. And I want to have this called switch ability, maybe. Switch. So switch ability, I'm going to go ahead and add that. And let's see, for right now, I'm going to go ahead and bind the tab key on my keyboard for this. So pressing tab will do that. And then maybe on our joypads, I'm going to do L1. Okay, good. I wasn't sure if it was plugged in. There we go. So now I've got this new switch ability action I can listen to. Okay, so we'll call switch ability here, or we'll check against switch ability. And then we'll call a function that doesn't exist yet, but we'll just call toggle ability. Okay, just like that. So let's grab this little function name. And then maybe underneath our boomerang ability, or even before actually, right? Before all of our abilities, we could have our toggle ability function. Okay. Now what this needs to do, as I mentioned, is we'll just kind of toggle through each of them. We can do that by updating the index of our ability. And we need that to wrap. So once you get to the last ability and hit tab again, you'll go back to the first. Okay. And that's actually really simple, because what we can do is we can take our selected, we can just manipulate this selected ability value and say that it is now equal to, and there's the wrap integer function, which will allow us to take a value and wrap it, meaning if it's higher than the highest value, it'll go back to the minimum. And so what we do is we provide, you see the first argument is the value that we want to wrap. and then it's the min and the max values that we're wrapping through. And so the value is actually the selected ability value plus 1. Okay. And then the minimum is 0 and the maximum is 4. Now this 0, the minimum is inclusive, meaning when it wraps, it will hit this as the lowest value. And the maximum is exclusive, meaning if it hits 4, then it becomes 0, right? And since this is indexed based, our first ability is 0 and our fourth ability is 3, okay? And so that's how that will work. Once we're on our fourth ability, meaning the index is 3, selected ability will be 3. When we add 1, it becomes 4, then it'll switch back to 0. And then all we need to do after this is also call our player HUD ability, or our player HUD function that we just wrote. So player HUD, and what do we call that? Update ability UI, something like that. There we go. And then we can just pass in our selected ability. That's the index that we need. Okay, let's go ahead and run this and see what happens. Hopefully it should work. I can hit tab. There we go. And it cycled through. Okay, so now when I'm on my first ability and I throw my boomerang, it works. Now, if I use the ability button while I'm on grappling hook, you can see when we look here that it says grapple hook. Okay. And if I do bow and arrow, you can see it says bow, and let's go to bombs and bomb. Okay. So now you can see that we've got this kind of functioning UI. Depending which item is selected, we're going to have a different outcome. And we'll just write functions in the future to make these do unique things. All right, so thank you for following along. I hope this has been informative. What we're going to be doing in our next video is we're going to actually start working on our bomb ability. There are some limitations, of course, to this UI and this system we've built, and so you may find that you need to do something different. The obvious limitation right now being the one-way toggle, which might not be ideal. Right now, we're also showing abilities that we may or may not have collected. In our last part of this little mini series, we will address that to some degree. We'll have a basic way to collect, update, and save which abilities the user has, and we'll make our interface a little bit dynamic based off of that, right? So we'll only show icons for the abilities that the player can use. We'll also have to eventually tie in a way to increase and decrease the quantities. Some of that will be in the per ability videos, right? So when we throw a bomb, we'll make it decrease, and then we'll do a subsequent video where we have the ability to pick up bombs or arrows. So if you are appreciating this content, if it's helping you out, then please give me a thumbs up, drop a comment below, and as always, subscribe to my channel if you want to see what's coming next, because I'm always trying to put out new content. And a huge shout out and thank you to my Patreon supporters. I greatly appreciate you guys and your willingness to support me on this journey. And if you aren't a Patreon supporter and you want to join, then go ahead and check it out below, but no pressure. And as always, we'll see you next time.